Tim, welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. Today we have an incredible array of exotica as well as traditional meat-of-the-market stainless steel full bracelet sports watches, a little bit of the high and the mainstream, plus a few exceptional pieces, the likes of which have never been on the show before and are not listed on our website. If you want to buy anything you see here or inquire about prices, accessories, or condition, email me tmosso@thewatchbox.com, your direct purchase and pricing email address for your questions about anything here. As ever, references, names, and where available, prices are in the description for the video. Let us get started. My Zin is underway, and so is our show. Speaking of a watch discontinued back in 2014, it's become the only of the modern Milgauss series, that is the 2007 to present Milgauss series, to have a real claim to collectability. Discontinued and much loved, it was rarely purchased in the early days because a white dial Rolex with orange accents, orange indices no less, was so unconventional, as well as postmodern. Its sensibility was different from any other Rolex at the time, including the GV green crystal Milgauss. Today, the 40mm stainless steel white dial Milgauss is a timepiece that has the eye of collectors in the same way that the Sea Dweller 116600 of 2014 to 2017 has the eye of collectors. Scarcity and charisma in both cases, as well as the fact that these are exemplary Rolex full bracelet stainless steel sports watches. They're not Cellinis, they're not weird offbeat models. They are right in the canon of historic Rolex. Sea Dwellers and Milgauss, of course, timepieces that represent slightly left of center Rolex timepiece production, as they're not as mainstream as the Sub, the Daytona, and the GMT, and for a lot of folks, that is the root of their appeal. You get to have all that Rolex represents: the history, the precision, the quality, the brand equity, but without the generic flavor that comes with owning the same watch as everyone else in your office park. In addition to an anti-magnetic soft iron cage around the movement here, we have an anti-magnetic escapement and a niobium zirconium hairspring, combining to make this Milgauss considerably more anti-magnetic than 1000 Gauss. I should also mention automatic winding with a 48-hour power reserve. It's 100 meters water resistant, so this is a full service three-hand no-date sports watch that keeps you out of the realm of generic. And so too does this particular iteration of the Daytona, which may be Rolex's finest of the 2010s. Now, I know folks love the steel ceramic, but for me, the steel panda in the white gold case with the Oysterflex bracelet is the one to own. A model launched alongside rose gold and yellow gold equivalents at Baselworld 2017. This watch has the 40mm white gold case with the Cerachrom ceramic bezel, but it has so much more. A dial that is neither gray nor silver, but somewhere in between. It's been described as steel, and I see it. Not only does it have the same kind of powerful metallic luster, but it has a deep intensity that you don't see on conventional silver dials. I've compared it in the past to Audi's Ava Silver, often used on its show cars, or Mercedes-AMG's Alubeam Silver, and indeed it is that. It is silver with balls and brass knuckles. Now, the Oysterflex is an interesting piece because though it looks like a strap externally and it wears like a strap, you can see it's even formally named Oysterflex, there is a titanium alloy band that runs inside, connects to the clasp, and then runs all the way around back to the opposing lug, which is to say you can't cut it and you can't tear it. So it has a degree of durability built in that you will not find on any vulcanized rubber strap. It also features bellows underneath that allow it to cinch down to the wrist, maintain an air pocket for ventilation on hot days, and also ensure a millimetrically precise fit. There are only a couple of Oysterflex bracelet sizes because you can't cut them to length. You want to get the one that approximates your wrist, and so it has that bellows system to help find the rest of the fit, to cinch down, create enough of a security on the wrist that you only need to get close. You don't need a perfect match. Nice and flat at 12.2 millimeters thick. It features the caliber 4130, 3-day power reserve, vertical clutch, column wheel, hacking seconds, COSC chronometer, and has that same anti-magnetic niobium zirconium blue oxidized parachrom blue hairspring that we just saw, or at least envisioned, inside the Milgauss. Full white gold deployment clasp, by the way, and again, 100 meters water resistant, probably the coolest version of the Daytona that you can buy today. Now, if you want a full bracelet sports watch and your budget isn't quite at the Rolex level, maybe we should talk about Rolex's great rival from Biel or Bien, depending on whether you are a German speaker or Francophone. And we have the lovely late 2013 release, Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter chronograph regatta, 44 millimeters with a coaxial chronometer column wheel movement. This is a timepiece that has an uncommon regatta calibration on its minute scale. So chronograph minutes calibrated to allow you to more easily track the countdown to the beginning of a match within a regatta or a sailboat race. You can see this is a very large scale version of the famed James Bond Seamaster, as it has the same bezel profile, case profile, helium escape valve for you heliox and exotic mixture divers, and then it has the same skeleton style hands. Here you can see a little bit of an upgrade. The materials here are better than what Pierce Brosnan would have known back in the 90s, as you have a bracelet that is held together entirely by screws rather than pin sleeves. You have a bezel that features a ceramic insert rather than the old anodized aluminum, and a dial that uses applique indices rather than the old printed features. You'll also note that although the chronograph pushers appear to be screw down, they are in fact shouldered for shear guard protection. You do not need to screw the pushers in or out to operate the chronograph, and the watch retains its 300 meter water resistance. Bezel action is good, and you can hear the click is positive. It's chunky, and because the bezel is taller than a standard Diver 300 meter, it's also easier to move the bezel and get a purchase on it. Now, fascinating, as ever, one of the best clasps and dive extensions in the business. The watch has a trigger-actuated clasp and a fold-out dive extension. I've never actually dived with my Diver 300 meter, but I have used the extension over a winter coat. Inside caliber 3330, which is a rare coaxial adaptation of a Valjoux 7750. Now, the watch features a 52-hour power reserve upgraded from 42, a column wheel upgraded from a cam, a coaxial escapement upgraded from a standard Swiss lever. It also features a free-sprung architecture and a silicone anti-magnetic hairspring, so you are getting all of the Omega toys in this watch. But let's say you're more of a Speedmaster man. Nevertheless, you don't want to go with a traditional moon watch because everyone has one. But again, you don't quite want to spend Rolex money. Well, in 2016, Omega gave you an option with the Omega Speedmaster Moon Watch Moonphase. This is a timepiece 44.25 millimeters in diameter. Footprint on the wrist is identical to a dark side of the moon. Now you can see the chronograph features a mono counter for hours and minutes chronograph functions over at 3 o'clock. There's also a mono counter for the date as well as constant seconds, and a moon phase down at 6 o'clock. You have a quick set for the date as well as the moon phase, and a ceramic tachymeter scale outboard. Inside you have caliber 9904, and you can see it through the reverse. Column wheel, vertical clutch, twin barrel, coaxial chronometer, 60-hour power reserve, and handsomely decorated. Though this watch is over 44 millimeters, you can see that because it's only about 50 millimeters from lug to lug, it wears nice and compact across the wrist. While the watch is broad, it is tall, and it is substantial, it's not terribly wide across my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference for that very reason. A lovely piece, and modern-day Omega bracelets are as good as Rolex. The solidity, the material quality, the amount of material provided, and the attention to detail rival anything coming out of Geneva. But let's say you want to cast off the Swiss shackles. You want something completely outside the norm, but you want it with impeccable quality, style, and perhaps a little bit of exclusivity. Well, for you, I have two from the seasonal collection from Grand Seiko. High beat, 10 beat per second movements. We have both green for the spring season and blue for autumn at night. The green dial, this is the SBGH 271, launched in 2019. It's a 44 millimeter stainless steel case that evokes the 1967 62GS, the first automatic Grand Seiko. 55-hour power reserve, automatic winding, 100 meters water resistant. It features that 10 beat per second El Primero-like escapement and extraordinary accuracy. The timepiece guaranteed by Grand Seiko to run typically no worse than +5, -3 seconds per day, and with a gloriously Zaratsu polished and satinated laminated case, this is a handmade and hand-finished watch. But perhaps you prefer the fall and the blue dial of the SBGH 273, another 2019 model. The watch features a blue dial with a subtle texture. Is it the texture of leaves, the form of perhaps cloud cover across the night sky, the undulations of the sky as seen with only moonlight? Who can say? But it is an incredibly nuanced dial, and you'll note here the use of silver indices and hands, rhodium-plated steel, rather than the gold employed on the 271. Which one do I prefer? Give me the green. Give me the green for its warmth, for the summery spring theme. I happen to like the warm weather better, and of course the combination of the gold and the green makes this the winner for me. But both of these mechanically identical in size, identical in spec, incredible pieces. Your preference, blue or green dial. Now I'm also going to say that for the next watch up, blue really is the only game in town, because if you're going to own an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo, then the blue Petite Tapisserie dial, blue galvanized and cut on a vintage pantograph lathe, is the one to own. For years, the blue dials have been retained typically by Audemars Piguet authorized dealers, generally the factory boutiques, as the blue has the highest rejection rate during the galvanizing process. As the result, it is the scarcest version of an already scarce watch. 39 millimeters in stainless steel, this is the closest modern day Royal Oak to the 1972 JaegerLeCoultre 5402 original. 39 millimeters, 8.2 millimeters thick. It is a front loader, which is to say it's a monoblock case. The back does not come off, meaning unlike the current Nautilus, this Genta descendant is assembled and constructed exactly like the original, and that continues on the case back, where you could see that the watch features the same 2121 caliber that would have been seen in the original Audemars Piguet Royal Oak in 1972. It's based on an ancient 1967 JLC Abauche. It beats away at 19,800 vibrations per hour, and unlike almost every other Audemars Piguet movement, the 4401, the 3120, the 4302, they are all mass-produced and machine-finished. This 2121 is hand-finished, and that's one of the principal reasons this watch is as scarce as it is. You can see that this is the post-2012 15202, as the AP logo is down at 6 o'clock on the dial. The date disc matches the color of the dial, and the indices are elongated right out to the inner bezel. There are no Arabic numerals outboard of the hour indices. It's a nice flat flush watch, but it does wear a size larger, so plan on it fitting like a conventional 41 millimeter round watch rather than a 39. I always tell people to size down a little bit when evaluating a Royal Oak or Royal Oak Offshore, and that goes for the Jumbo as well. The best of all possible worlds, JaegerLeCoultre design, Audemars Piguet finishing, and a JLC designed movement that is now built in-house and finished by Audemars Piguet. So it is AP's movement today, despite the lineage. Approximately 9 to 11 hours invested just in the finishing of the bracelet. This is a handmade, hand-finished, and extraordinarily uncommon watch with real soul. If you're going to buy an Audemars Piguet, just one Audemars Piguet, make it this one right here. Now, we have quite a few watches on straps, and you could say that straps versus bracelets could be the theme of the show. And I have to say that of all the watches on the straps today, I'm at a loss for choosing my favorite, so I'm going to jump straight into one that is firmly in contention. Launched in late 2017 and arguably the best Vacheron of the 2010s, this is the Historique Triple Calendar 1942. Based on an historic model powered by a JLC, or I should say at the time, a LeCoultre Abauche, this is a 40mm stainless steel watch that is designed to evoke the best of late Art Deco in the triple Gadron strakes of its case and the corne de vache or cowhorn style lugs beautifully welded on, evoking the past but with modern fit, finish, and detailing. The watch has a broad array of textures, tones, and colors on its dial. As you can see, silver, blue, black, and red. Of course, in a nod to history, it features thin baton-style hands and upright somewhat ornate late Art Deco Arabic numerals with a blue scale for the pointer date outboard and that red index pointer. It even features a generously cambered box section sapphire designed to evoke the plexiglass of the original. Flip it over and you can see that this is where things become a little bit more contemporary, as we no longer use a LeCoultre Bausch but a Vacheron in-house caliper based on the 4400 manual wind. 5-position adjustment, which is the high horology standard. It's also Geneva hallmark, and if you take careful note, you'll note the Geneva hallmark on both the case and the movement, as it is now a full watch standard since 2012. The movement with a 65-hour manual wind power reserve and all of the good stuff. As you can see, real Côte de Genève laid down by abrasive wheel. One side is dark, one side is light. That is evidence that this was laid down in stripes rather than stamped. All black polished screw heads with chamfered slots, engine turned perlage on the base plate, and a high degree, if we can catch it in the studio, I'll do my best here, but there is mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge, that hand chamfered bevel. You can really see it well from that angle. This too a hand finished watch, but of a very different character from a typical Vacheron, as the stainless steel case makes it a no-nonsense everyday option that's robustly resistant to scratches and scuffs in a way a precious metal Vacheron can't be. At 40 millimeters, I have to say the watch wears smaller than its rated size, that largely due to the very spare and sharply downturned corne de vache or cowhorn style, maybe even claw style lugs. This is a beautiful timepiece and the Vacheron to own, in my opinion. It's true the American 1921 is better known, but I think this is a better design effort and more desirable objectively. Now, we spoke of LeCoultre briefly. Why don't we speak of JaegerLeCoultre? Why don't we speak of the modern iteration of the brand doing its own tribute to history, this time, once again, its own history. 1958, the International Geophysical Year, JaegerLeCoultre launches the Geophysic, water-resistant, anti-magnetic, and a chronometer. The 35mm original was the most advanced, durable, and most finely finished watch that JaegerLeCoultre knew how to make at the time. Few were made, prices were sky high, and today they are coveted. In 2014, JLC came out with this, a 300-piece rose gold limited edition tribute to Geophysic that is scrupulously accurate in every detail, right down to an emulation of the original, if we can look at the inside of the bezel here, but an emulation of the original crystal-mounted radium lume. You can see here, rather than mounting on the underside of a plexiglass crystal as with the original, the individual hour dots of Luminova are placed on the inner bezel. Very faithful. It also includes what was rare at the time, the crosshair dial, along with quad Arabic numerals at the quarters. So the crosshair dial, aesthetically the most pleasing of the original Geophysics, here comes back with broadsword style hands and rose gold indices as well as numerals on this satin silver white dial. The timepiece features the lines of the original Geophysic, but in a more contemporary 38.5mm case rather than the 35mm original. You can see that the case is handsomely finished and nuanced in its use of lines, both curves and creases, as well as polish and satination. It's less than 12 millimeters thick, 38.5 millimeters in diameter, and remarkably just as capable, if not more so, relative to the original. Let's talk about precision. The original was a chronometer. This watch comes with a special standard of adjustment from JLC. The caliber 898 regulated to keep no worse time than -1 + 4 seconds per day. Better even than the Master Control's -1 + 6. 100 meters water resistant. This is a true all-around sports watch. And underneath its solid case back, which features the geosphere symbol of the International Geophysical Year of 1958, you have a soft iron inner cage to protect the hairspring, which is ferrous, from magnetic fields. The soft iron will bend the field lines around the movement in the hairspring. It is paramagnetic. So anti-magnetic, highly water resistant for a timepiece this ornate and this elegant, and of course very wearable. 38.5 millimeters. This is no giant. It's larger than the original, but it's not large. And in rose gold, it works perfectly well as a dress watch. Throw it on a NATO strap, a textile, or a rubber strap, and you're ready to take it in the water. Possibly the most versatile all-around style and specification JLC released in the last few years. This is a watch that is coveted, and with 300 made, it's actually scarcer in rose gold than the original geophysical model. Now, we talked a little bit about Grand Seiko, but Grand Seiko comes in many forms: sports watches, dress watches, simple, complications, bracelets, and of course straps. And for 2019, we had a lovely 1500-piece stainless steel special edition blue scatter dial Elegance series SBGK005. From the Elegance collection, it is, well, exactly that. A 39mm case that is slim with graceful spare and tightly downturned lugs. It features a narrow satin-finished case band with all the polish elements Zaratsu finished by holding the steel directly against a tin plate milling surface. This, too, is a hand-finished watch. One of the finest aspects of any Grand Seiko is the dial. Here you can see the Iwatayama dial, effectively a scatter pattern designed to evoke the snow dispersal across the peak of Mount Iwate, which is local to Grand Seiko's Northern Japan studios. And you can see that the individual hands, indices, and dial furniture are all diamond finished by micrometric artisans who just create these pieces and nothing else. They make these components all day long with a combination of satination polish and sharp crease lines and bevels. The dial here is as beautiful as anything you will see from Rolex. Grand Seiko and Rolex making the finest dials, in my experience, in the mainstream. You'll also note the unconventional use of a mechanical, manual wind Grand Seiko caliber, the all-new caliber 9S63 with small seconds and a power reserve. No date on the dial, very clean, 3-day power reserve. You could see the movement through the case back. Again, a 1500-piece limited edition. This is a very special watch. Handmade externally, handmade dial, and hand-adjusted movement. Watchmaker built, regulated, and artisanally finished at every step of the process. It is not a Swiss watch, and it is proud of it. A timepiece that wears easily across the wrist at under 44mm lug to lug. I can recommend it for a wrist of any size. It is comfortable, it is stylish, and the blue metallic of the dial with the sensitive texturing as well as the highly faceted and gem-like brilliance of the indices, making this a truly special sight that will draw plaudits, even as folks try to guess where it came from. This is not a watch snob's watch. This is a watch nerd's watch. That said, if you want your heaping helping of pop culture and recognition with your Grand Seiko, we can do that too, courtesy of the Godzilla 65. 65 years of Godzilla, 650 pieces. Toho Films' famous ambassador, creating the inspiration for the model I hold before you, the SBJ 405, 44.5mm in titanium. It is a spring drive GMT with an explosive sunray style red dial designed to evoke the radioactive breath of Godzilla. After all, his breath is death, and this style reminds you of as much. But you'll also note, if you're a real nerd, otaku, I think is the correct terminology in this case, that there are versions of Godzilla in cinema so radioactive that he actually glows red from under his scales, and that is exactly the effect that this leather strap is designed to evoke. You'll also appreciate the fact that with the sapphire capped bezel, you have not only a tonal contrast with the blue-gray slate color of the bezel underneath the scratch-resistant sapphire, but you have a fully lumed bezel that's easy to see. A lovely polyhedron case featuring alternate satination and that Zaratsu tin plate manual polish, and because it is more of a cushion case than a round case, it actually sits easily on my 16cm circumference wrist with lugs that wrap rather around the wrist instead of flaring over. You can see it's not broad across the wrist, making it a surprisingly wearable timepiece. Highly water resistant, it is swimmable, and it uses a hot-rodded spring drive caliber 9R15. So while conventional spring drive pre-2020 had accuracy of plus or minus 15 seconds a month, the 9R15 has been specially adjusted and equipped with a custom quartz crystal to run no worse than plus or minus 10 seconds a month. Remember, a Swiss chronometer, mechanical, runs minus 4 plus 6 seconds per day or better. This is plus or minus 10 per month. It has a 72-hour power reserve. There is a power reserve indicator on the dial. It is manual, mechanical watch precision. I should say this one is actually a lovely automatic winder. So mechanical watch precision, but with quartz refinement. It is the soul of a mechanical watch with the precision of a quartz timepiece. That is what spring drive is, as there are no batteries, capacitors, or stepper motors. All of the motion, all of the energy is derived solely from the spring. And again, 650 pieces in titanium, a very special Grand Seiko, a timepiece I happen to adore, and I'm a Godzilla fan. I've seen all of them. I've seen the best, I've seen the worst, I've seen the worst of the worst. Godzilla on Monster Island with baby Godzilla, and I still love the character. I adore this watch. Now let's talk a little bit about something that is perhaps more traditional, more traditionally Swiss, albeit with more of a French watchmaking inflection. Remember, French, Swiss, and French are very different. And in the case of these four watches I'm about to show you, none of which are on our website, we have a French watchmaker channeling the best of Swiss history, starting with the FP Journe Jour et Nuit, the day and the night, 38 millimeters, platinum, brass movement era with a 5-day power reserve. This one features a white gold dial and the titular Moonphase. I should say actually Jour et Nuit, the timepiece right here. Oh, my mistake. This is the Phase de Lune. I meant to bring the Jour et Nuit. All the same, this is a watch that does in fact include a Moonphase, and as you can see, being 38 millimeters platinum with the brass movement, this is a watch that represents an opportunity to own one of the earlier Journe pieces. The early Octas featured a juxtaposition of 22-karat red gold rotor and rhodium-plated brass bridges and plates. So they have that silver sheen, even though they are golden-colored brass, because the rhodium is what you put on a brass movement to avoid corrosion. And these early Journe watches, now discontinued serially, are considered collectible because they represent a period when Journe was making far fewer than its current roughly 900 watches a year. And what's interesting here is that you have several discontinued features. This is a discontinued version of the Phase de Lune, the Moonphase, a discontinued 38mm case size no longer offered, as well as a discontinued version of the caliber 1300 5-day automatic, as we have that brass set of bridges and plates. So the model, the size, the movement style, and even the use of Eleanor French-made cases, as after roughly 2008, FP Journe took his case manufacture in-house with Boîtier de Genève. He bought his old Paris metro area supplier, which was called Eleanor, and he moved the operation across the border to Switzerland. Many of the same people still commute and live in France and work in Switzerland at Boîtier de Genève. But what you will not find on a current Journe case made in Switzerland is double hallmarking, as well as the maker's mark of the old Eleanor company. The double hallmarking is precious metal hallmarking for France and for Switzerland. You'll also note, let me see if I could show this to you, there is a little identifier on the case. Here it is right here. You can see it. This is how the cases were made right up until roughly 2005, as there is a serial number and then there is the year and the reference. So the year that the case was made is a feature that was phased out after 2005. So many discontinued features on this Journe. When you throw it on my wrist, you can see the 38 wears wonderfully. 38, back when FP Journe started making wristwatches under his own name in 1999, was considered to be plenty of size for a men's dress complication. It was considered, if anything, oversized by traditional standards of men's dress watches, which tended to be 33 to 35 millimeters, even entering the early 90s. Patek Philippe and the reference 5000 stand as a testament to those times. This watch in 38 now represents something of a kinder, gentler era of Journe. The Phase de Lune being a lovely piece, but the serial discontinued features combined into one unit on my wrist represent an outstanding collector opportunity. That said, I am not in love with the Moonphase. While it has been called the most romantic and poetic, the Phase de Lune to me is a little bit too inert. I like something that I can look at every day and from which I can benefit every day. When writing emails, correspondence, memos, I often need to know when it is, not just what time it is. And that's exactly what you get with this 38mm rose gold brass movement Octa Calendrier. another discontinued model in a discontinued size with a discontinued movement. This watch is 38 millimeters in rose gold with a white gold dial. An annual calendar. It features a retrograding date as well as the day and the month, so it retrogrades with quite a bit of dynamism if you care to stay up until midnight to watch it. But on a daily basis, you can consult this watch and write your memos, your correspondence, your letters, your emails, and I adore that. The rose gold gives this watch some much needed warmth that I find missing in the platinum case. And as you can see, the movement on the case back, another brass movement Journe. This one in perhaps my favorite of the Octa complications, and you will note that same juxtaposition of the red gold rotor with the brass movement. Now what I like about this one is that it's on a lovely Parisian Jean Rousseau strap that has a combination of navy blue alligator leather and golden contrasting stitch that match the watch perfectly. This is a handsome, everyday practical dress complication that represents a great way to get into vintage and early FP Journe while maintaining practicality. I love calendar watches, and this is one of the best. Of course, the annual calendar needing adjustment only once a year annually during the jump from February to March. Now, sticking with Journe for a moment, and now we're talking about core collection FP Journe, because if you're going to own just one FP Journe, it's going to be a Tourbillon, Remontoire, or it's going to be a Res. This is a lovely Resonance 1. 38 millimeter platinum case, symmetrical dials, and as you can see, this one too with the brass movement, but the brass movement takes on a different dimension with a Resonance 1, because unlike the same movement in rose gold, as we saw after mid-2004, the brass version has a different set of bridges. You'll note that not only is it a different material, but the barrel bridge is completely different in layout, as on the subsequent model in rose gold, you only saw the pivot points for the barrels. Here, you can see both of the ratchet wheels as well as the crown wheel fully visible on top of the bridges. Now, the resonance phenomenon, of course, originally conceived by Antide Janvier, a clockmaker, who realized that pendulum clocks in close proximity would synchronize themselves. The same is true of metronome. FP Journe, beginning in the 1980s, started research on the phenomenon of resonance in timekeepers and found that it could be achieved using Swiss lever escapements and balances in proximity, and the parasitic losses radiating out from these regulators help to synchronize these two balances so that they run in sync and they mutually regulate. If one runs fast, the other will tend to slow it down, and vice versa. There are two barrels, two drivetrains, two separate escapements, no physical link between these two movements in one case. It's the resonance phenomenon that couples them. This watch also an Eleanor case with a manufacturing date stamp on the back, a year stamp, this one 04. You can see that it takes about 7 to 10 minutes for the resonance phenomenon to take purchase, so the seconds hands will not be synchronized. You pull the trigger down at 4 o'clock and that synchronizes via a flyback mechanism the seconds. You can set the two dials to separate times, so in addition to being a resonance chronometer, it also works as a true dual time with a 40-hour power reserve and a power reserve indicator that stands for both of the barrels at the same time. It is a bullhead winder and setter. Throw it on the wrist, it's a lovely piece. The Res 1 is the Res to own. A good size, a rare watch, an original concept, mechanically intricate, immaculately styled, and highly refined. This appeals to both left and right sides of the brain. A handsome, rare, and eminently desirable early Journe. Of the early Journe pieces on the table today, this would be my choice. Now, the next watch I'm going to show you is not necessarily early FP Journe, as the timepieces were built from 2009 to about 2010, meaning the Octa Perpetuelle was not necessarily early in the FP Journe chronology, except in the sense that it was his first perpetual calendar wristwatch. It started as a calendrier, annual calendar, but produced for the anniversary of FP Journe's Tokyo boutique, his first factory-owned store. We have a combination of rose gold and titanium in a 99-piece limited series with an extraordinary ruthenium-colored dial featuring gilt golden rose gold print, that same flyback or retrograding date, but you get a perpetual calendar system, as you can see, February or February with a Quantieme Bissextile, the leap year indicated. And there is an adjuster that asks you to pull and push on the flank, so you cannot accidentally adjust the perpetual calendar system You also don't need a tool to adjust the perpetual calendar system, and that was Journe's aim in creating this watch. It still has the 5-day power reserve and the automatic winding of the Octa movement, but in truth, the movement is accurate for 5 days. It will run for almost 7. Now here you can see we've moved on to the rose gold movements that came into play at FP Journe in mid-2004. So this timepiece is special because it's rare. It's a famous first, and as a 99-piece limited series in ultra uncommon Journe titanium, it is different in almost every way a Journe watch can be different. You'll also note the use of a rich, full red gold deployant clasp. FP Journe, even on high complications, generally only specifies a pin buckle, so to get this and to get it in gold is a special refinement on an already handsome and lavishly equipped watch. Okay, now we're getting into the Hall of Fame, and I think I speak for everyone when I say the Patek Philippe 57 is in the Hall. A first ballot. Unanimous vote? Possibly. The 5070R launched in 2004. The original 5070 chronograph, 42 millimeters in yellow gold, launched at 1998's Basel World. In 2004, we got the red gold model, and it was built until 2008. Roughly 250 pieces per metal per year were constructed, so you have a pretty good idea of how many of these were made. Now, the timepiece is extraordinary in its use of a broad, flat, and tiered 42 millimeter red gold case. You can see the dial is stacked almost like a pagoda. The lugs are welded on with a sharp break between lug profiles and case band, and it's only about 46.5 millimeters lug to lug, so though it's a 42, it's narrow across the wrist and wears easily. Rose gold indices, or I should say rose gold Arabic numerals, and rose gold leaf hands. You can see that it has a double concentric scale outboard with a tachometer for gauging the speed of an object and a chronograph scale inboard of that. You'll also note the sunken sub-registers, and the timepiece has a lovely combination of rose gold and a sort of silver slate dial, as this, a little bit like the Rolex we saw earlier, is not a perfect silver. It's a little bit darker to add intensity. Turn it all over, and this is where the fun starts. One might argue that the 5070 is a design icon, and I wouldn't contest the point, but you could see here the CH2770 is the star of the show. It's based on the Lange 2310 manual wind Bausch that, as the Omega 321, went to the moon. Now, Patek makes some changes. Free sprung with a 5-position adjustment versus unadjusted with a mobile stud index. Patek increases the power reserve from 48 hours to 65, finishes Geneva hallmark. The lateral clutch is jeweled, and as you can see, everything is executed to a level of refinement you will not find on a standard pre-moon Omega. This is effectively Patek's own movement, right down to the handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring compared to the basic Bausch's flat hairspring. Now, as you can see, the lateral clutch and the column wheel make for quite a bit of theater, as you could see everything. Satin finished and beveled steel chronograph components. You could see the rhodium plated brass components of the movement itself, the chronograph bridge with instantaneous jumping minute, the Côte de Genève stripes across the bridges, the black polished screws, the engine turned perlage on the base plate. And as you can see, if I can get the right angle here, everything with a mirrored ungulage bevel. You can also see the same treatment in all of the jewel and screw countersinks. This is an immaculately finished classical movement. Throw it on the wrist. It wears easy, it wears comfortable, it's natural. Like I said, it's not broad across the wrist because though the case is large and flat, the lugs themselves are spare and short. Truly cuffable, you can see it easily slides underneath any kind of a sleeve. A lovely, modern men's complication. This is a watch that was absolutely gigantic by the standards of dress watches in 1998. Today, the 42 seems just right, and the 5070 has not aged one day since its famous debut. And I should also mention, compared to the mass-produced 5170 that succeeded it, this watch was constrained, remains rare, and will always be more collectible. Now let's talk a little bit about Patek Philippe in a form that we scarcely mention, the retrograde date perpetual calendar. Back in 2011, Patek launched the 5496P, 39.5 millimeters in platinum. It was a little bit austere. It was too cold and clinical. All grayscale, silver shine. Well, for 2016, Terry Stern started to fix that with rose gold indices and hands, as well as, and we're going to get as close as we can here to the dial, for the first time, applique rose gold Arabic numerals for the retrograding date scale. They have 3 dimensions, height, width, and length. So they have volume, and they add not only another focal plane to the dial, but the warmth along with the rose gold hands and indices that was missing in the original. It's a caliber 324 base, so it's one of the center rotor Patek Perpetual calendars, and guaranteed per the Patek Seal 6-position adjustment and a Spiromax silicone hairspring to run no worse than -3 plus 2 seconds per day. A lovely timepiece. Wearing easily on the wrist, again, 39.5 millimeters is a good size for this type of watch. It doesn't seem petite, but nor does it seem ungainly. And because of the shape of the lugs and the span of the lugs, it remains viable on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. So if you're a lady looking for a potent unisex option, this is certainly that. If you're a man who prefers a more discreet timepiece rather than a look-at-me Nautilus, this is definitely the way to go. It's also one of the scarcest of the modern Patek Perpetual calendars, as I rarely see this version, the -015 iteration of the 5496P. So rarity is assured, though by no means as you'll find it on the Patek Philippe 5101J. Built from 2012 to 2014 in only a handful of examples per year, there may be as few as 3 or 4 dozen 5101Js in the world, with an extraordinary Gondolo tiered case profile inspired by the Art Deco reference 514 of first half 20th century antiquity. This yellow gold case is 51 millimeters from lug to lug, 30 millimeters wide, and as you can see, quite slender and under 13 millimeters thick. The tiered gadrons arcing across the span of the case, giving it a wonderful machine age aesthetic. Not the machine age as we think of it today with cynicism, but the machine age as it appeared to the eyes of the 1920s and the 30s. A bright, optimistic future, and that is the spirit of this watch. Not only is it guaranteed to run to the standards I previously mentioned, the -3 plus 2 seconds per day, it is a 10-day power reserve with power reserve indicator and an extraordinary, shaped and sized 10-day power reserve tourbillon caliber. Let's fire it up. Caliber 2820 REC T IRM, you wind it a little faster here, is a 21,600 vibration per hour beat, 1-minute tourbillon movement that features an extraordinary set of barrels and train wheels in chaton. As you could see, you have the barrels set in golden chaton, as they would have been in the pocket watch era. You have a nod to the antiquity and glory of Patek Philippe's chronometry tourbillon movements of the mid-20th century, and some of the architecture of this movement is based on those chronometry competition calibers. You can see a full black polished bridge for the tourbillon, which beats away on an overcoil hairspring with a free-sprung Gyromax style architecture. This is Patek Philippe's highest level of finish. No corners are cut, nothing is cursory, nothing is a half measure, no time was spared. And with at most a dozen of these watches hailing from Geneva each year, exclusivity was assured and plenty of time was taken to ensure that you received a watch worth your while when you spent perhaps as much as a year awaiting the return of your order. And yes, this was an application piece available only upon approval of the Sterns. Throw it on the wrist and you can see it's not a huge watch, but it's certainly more insistent than a 5124. This is a timepiece that you can see and feel. It has a lot of presence, and in yellow gold, it has a classicism about it, though not discretion. It stands proud of the wrist. It is large, it is expressive. It's a timepiece for the guy who might be a little bit flamboyant about his connoisseurship. If you want a Patek Philippe that combines the best of everything, you want the 5101, shaped, sized, regulated like a chronometer with 10-day duration and a tourbillon. This is a Patek Philippe movement for the ages in a case whose design has already stood the rigor of ages. Where do you go from there? Well, you go to Saxony with a Lange und Sohne and yet another take on the tourbillon regulator. Launched in the year 2000, 38.5 millimeters in platinum, this is the Lange 1 tourbillon with a black polished half bridge, skeletonized no less, for a tourbillon that beats away like the Patek at 21.6, a 1-minute period, and a diamond capstone. Yeah, that's right, the jewels in this watch are synthetic rubies, but real diamonds. It still has the 3-day power reserve and the power reserve indicator. It still features the push-button panorama datum adjustment system system with the feel of a fine column wheel chronograph, and it features twin freehand engraved half bridges for the tourbillon and its drivetrain. Also note the use of blued screws, blackened screws, glasuta stripes, the freehand engraving flanked by engine-turned perlage and mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge, with jewels set in screw-fixed golden chiton, one-upping the pressed chiton of the Patek Philippe. And of course, the timepiece beautiful in every regard and rare, with only 150 pieces made in the year 2000 in platinum, as you see here, wearable on almost any wrist size, as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. You're going to love this watch. Platinum on the outside with a sterling silver dial and a movement that can only be described metaphorically as solid gold. But it is not the ultimate Lange on the table. That honor is reserved solely to the great 2005 51-piece 41.2 millimeter Tourbograph pour le Merite. It is a tourbillon. It is a rattrapant split seconds chronograph. It is, on top of everything else, a fusee and chain with a constant force mechanism. Note the use of the same tourbillon, albeit bigger, bolder, more visible than on the Lange 1, with a filigree-style wire cage and a slim, black-polished full bridge. The brainchild of the late genius watch executive Günter Blümlein. Although he died in 2001, this was his final inspiration, the Tourbograph pour le Merite. Tourbograph because it is both a split-second chronograph and a tourbillon, and pour le Merite because traditionally at a Lange & Söhne, pour le Merite stands for the use of a fusee and chain. With 636 parts in the constant force device, the fusee and chain, which works precisely like bicycle gearing. Not only do you get constant force to the escapement for the 36 hours of manual wind power reserve, but this extraordinary caliber L903 has 1,101 parts. There's even a power reserve indicator on the dial. This watch, a quadruple complication, has it all going on, and in a rarity for Lange timepieces, features a full platinum deployant clasp. Throw it on the wrist and this double column wheel lateral clutch chronograph wears easily. In spite of its size, it's no monstrosity. You can wear it with a measure of pride and some discretion, as the white metal, the insider brand, the watch connoisseur model name are going to keep it largely opaque to a public programmed to look for Rolex and Omega on the wrist. This is the best buy in pre-owned haute de gamme. A Lange & Söhne, it does not get any better. You can even see their architecture on the reverse side with a decoupler system for the rattrapant. They actually decouple the two hands when you stop the first hand so that the chronograph mechanism doesn't drag and slow down the watch. With two column wheels at your service, you can't lose. 1,101 parts, all of them hand finished and double assembled for precise operation and exacting regulation. That is as good as it gets in the world of watches. This has been a crazy show, and we're living in a crazy world. I hope I brightened your Wednesday morning. You sure brightened mine. Again, email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for questions about any of these. None of these Journe watches are on the website, so you're going to want to reach out if you're interested in those in particular. Thanks to you, thanks to my crew. Time out, Tim out. I love Lange, and thanks for logging on.